So it's 2 o'clock, and my name's Mike Bailey from Parsons, Bailey and Latimer. And I'd like to welcome you to another Parsons, Bailey and Latimer webcast. This one entitled Reopening Utah's Restaurants, What Owners Need to Know. I want to give a hearty thank you to Jason Castor, who is the Parsons, Bailey and Latimer Chief Development Officer, who has a fantastic team who has put these together. And he has cautioned me that before we get started, I need to give you a legal disclaimer. We are lawyers, so we're good at disclaimers. So let me read you this. This disclaimer is extremely important. Things on these issues change rapidly. This webinar is not a substitute for legal advice. If there are questions about the information contained in the presentation and how it applies to your business, you should contact your legal counsel. This presentation is not intended and will not serve as a substitute for legal counsel on these issues. With that, you're all muted, but you have a chat feature, and I will be watching that feature and pick up a few questions from it as we go. Your time is valuable, and we are only going to take 45 minutes of it, so let's jump right in. There's a lot of talk of when the state might go from orange to yellow, and the announcement actually might come quite soon. So we're here to help you prepare before that day. And to help you, we have assembled an all-star cast. We have a lawyer to tell you the law, but have also brought business leaders, restaurateurs with a wealth of experience to this webinar. The lawyer is Sean Monson, the Employment Department Chair of Parsons, Bailey and Latimer in Salt Lake City. And the restaurateurs are Blake Spalding from Hell's Backbone Grill in Boulder, Utah, Lauren Smaha from Freshies Lobster, and Tim Ryan, who is both from Bout Time Pub and Grill and also the board chair of the Salt Lake Area Restaurant Association. So with that, Sean, I'm going to start with you. And there's lots to talk about. We want restaurateurs to make sure that they avoid mistakes. My dad always taught me to have a plan. And do you agree? And if so, what does the plan look like? What should restaurateurs be doing now to prepare to reopen?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And thanks, everyone, for joining our webinar. It's one of the things we've been telling clients, and including restaurants that are our clients, is that it is absolutely critical to have a plan, not just for quote unquote reopening, but for the whole duration when we're dealing with COVID-19. The world has changed, obviously. I'm not telling anyone any news when I tell you that the world has changed. And there is significant risk and potential exposure to employers who don't carefully create and construct a plan for bringing employees back. That plan can include a number of things, but kind of the three main things it needs to talk about is it needs to talk about people. And what I mean by that is who's going to come back, when they're going to come back. Are you going to have staggered shifts? Are you going to alter employee shifts for these folks when they come back? Places, and that would be things like how are you going to reconfigure the workplace if necessary to try to keep distancing between employees and other employees, and also employees and customers. What barriers are you going to put in place to try to minimize interaction and face-to-face and personal contact interactions between employees and customers? And then the last thing is policies. And those are policies regarding things such as cleaning surfaces and wearing personal protective equipment. And there's a whole host of other policies that you need to be thinking about. But those are the kind of issues that we address, that we are talking with employers about and creating a plan. And some of our employers are kind of questioning us and saying, why should we create a plan? What's the point of having a plan? And the reason why you want to have a plan is that there is risk. What you're doing as an employer in a company, and this had happened before COVID-19 and it's happening after COVID-19, is you are trying to manage risk, and you're trying to create a workplace where employees can work efficiently because they feel safe, they can come back, and customers want to come back and buy your goods and services. And having a plan and executing on that plan significantly helps manage risk and reduces potential liability. as well as making both your employees and your customers feel safe coming to your workplace.
So Sean, that's fantastic. Let me start with you, Lauren, and ask you, is Freshies back up open or are you still just doing takeout?
So we are open in our Salt Lake location for dine-in. We haven't opened up Park City, although we could. We're just we're waiting a little bit longer. It's just not busy up here yet anyway, so it didn't seem like any purpose to opening the dining room yet.
So can you tell the listeners just a little bit about kind of what steps you're taking? I mean, restaurants are pretty interesting because not only do you have employees, but you have customers. You know, some of these webinars that we do, like with manufacturing plants, they have no customers, so they only have to worry about keeping their employees safe.
Right.
But you have both. And so can you tell the listeners a little bit about what you're doing at Freshies to keep both your employees and your customers safe?
Yeah, so I was, with all of this, I read ahead, one step ahead, like so when we were in red, I read what's next for orange. So I was, ready with the masks and hand sanitizer, all these new requirements by the health department. We already, it's a simple operation. We never have more than 3, maximum 4 employees working at a time. So distancing in that way was somewhat already there. We now have basically somebody who's managing the customers coming in to make sure they know exactly, what the expectation is, the new way we operate, essentially having, spacing at our line out the door, please, go sanitize your hands. If you want to wash your hands, that would be great. So I think those are the steps we've taken for the customer's sake. We also have our flow of traffic is 1 door in, 1 door out.
Right.
So there's just not a lot of, moving about. And then of course we're still offering our curbside pickup. So it's been a hard adjustment just because, it's something that normally would take 3 people, might take 4 now because we're getting pulled in a lot of different directions to try to, some people still want curbside, some people want to dine in, so.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. So Blake, I'm going to turn to you. Tell us about Hell's Backbone Grill. It's not on the Wasatch Front. I heard you refer to it as Southern Utah. I always thought Boulder was kind of central Utah, but I'm going to take your word for it. And so just tell us a little bit about kind of whether you're up and going and kind of what your plans are to keep customers and employees.
Well, our situation is maybe kind of unique. Well, it is unique. So firstly, we're very rural. We live in a town of about 300 people. So our customer base is tourists. We have operated our business here. This is our 20th year. It would have been our 21st season. So for us, we are not currently open to the public at all. And we aren't really planning to get open to the public in any kind of a hurry. So we're taking a wait, watch, and learn kind of approach. Fine dining is inherently intimate. In order for me to set your plate of food or open your bottle of wine, I need to be very close to you. And so we're going to try to see how it goes for other fine dining operations. And then the other issue for us is we don't have any, we don't have a good healthcare system here. And so our town has been very careful. And, there are people here starting to get open this next week, but we have a farm that we operate that grows, at 20 to 25,000 pounds of organic produce every year for us. And then we have a retail division that's online. And so we ship out mixes and our homemade jams and pickles and cookbooks and things like that all over the country. So right now we've decided that model of the retail is keeping the lights on And what we don't want to do is imperil that little revenue stream we do have to rush to get open. Our greatest fear is that if, as cases are continuing to climb in Utah, and the algorithms are pretty scary, what they're saying may happen in the United States by June 1st. What we don't want to have is we spend all the money and all the effort and energy to get open, and then we get put back into a red again. And so we're proceeding very conservatively.
Yeah, you have such a unique situation because you're in that rural location in Boulder. And so that's a very interesting perspective. And you've done what so many other restaurants have done. I know of some restaurants that have kind of converted their kitchens into making and bottling spaghetti sauce and doing that to keep the lights on. We buy most of our produce from a catering company in Salt Lake that's effectively not doing catering right now. And so good job on being creative and keeping the lights on. So Tim, I'm going to turn to you and just kind of ask you the same question. Where is About Time in the continuum? And are you back to full capacity? If not, what are your plans?
Well, our locations, we have a multi-unit experience with 14 locations and about 350 employees in our system, most of them in Utah. We had several locations that remained open for to-go during the closure period, and we had others that were franchise operators that chose to close completely. So we reopened May 1st in accordance with the Phase Orange guidelines, and I feel that we're very well prepared for that, but it is a whole new ball game. Our customers definitely were excited to get back, and it's hard to pump the brakes for them. We are a sports bar environment, so that's very chummy, right? That's your friends and family. You got to break them up a little bit. Because our greatest fear too is for a second wave, third wave, something that will cause a second closure, which we absolutely all have to work together to avoid. So we were very strong on implementing procedures starting back in February, where we had already implemented extra sanitation procedures, removing things from the tables that guests could handle, like condiments and so on and so forth. So we had a little bit of a jump on that. And so coming back, it's been a big help. In terms of the operations, our locations that did stay open for to-go are achieving great success. I mean, we are back on average to 75% of business in just a few days. And that's growing every day. I've got one location that's been hitting 100%. Even with 50% reduced capacity for guest seating, but that's coming out of to-go, the balance. Our locations that were closed are taking a little bit longer, but they're growing every day as people out that Utah's and our restaurants and bars are getting open for business. So they're growing every day, but those that stay closed, we're running about 25 to 40% of their pre-closure sales. I think as with a lot of people that are SLARA, Salt Lake Area Restaurant Association members, they've been very active in getting prepared to open right, meaning, how you handle the food, how you handle the customer, how you treat your guests and what your expectations are of the guests. I mean, you've got to really stay on top of it 100% of the time with your staff and managers to make sure we have a successful kind of re-entry to the market.
That's great. That's great. Let me ask a question of Lauren and Tim, because you're both open in certain capacities. Are you, and let me start with you, Lauren, are you having any trouble obtaining PPE, personal protection equipment, gloves, masks, all those things that you need as a restaurateur to open the right way?
I have not actually. I've been able to I went to a local vodka company to get the hand sanitizer. I was having trouble with sanitizer until I got an email from Five Wives in Ogden. So yeah, I haven't. I bought the staff custom masks, so I already had those ready to go and made, and washable masks, so that so we weren't depending on something that is disposable and can't get them anymore. And we do have those as well if they forget. So
that's great. Tim, how about with you? I mean, you have more stores than anyone else on the call, and are you having any trouble with any of that?
The only thing that we've been struggling, but we've got them sourced finally, are thermometers so that we can
yeah.
check temperatures for returning employees and for those same employees every time you show up for shift. That's been a challenge, but that's resolving itself. Gloves, we sourced what we could. We've also gone to other restaurants that had success in buying them and bought extra from them. And then masks, we didn't have any problem, sourcing the masks for our people. We have some of our employees, again, like Lauren, having, I'll call them homemade, but having, custom made masks. And so that's been working out okay. I would have never thought I'd have such a glove budget, because I mean, we're changing them faster than the ER, for those front of the house employees with every guest contact. So you drop the meals, those gloves come off, go in the garbage, you're new for the next drop.
Yeah. At our law firm, we were trying to source gloves, and the smallest order we could make was 20,000. And so we were talking to the vendor, and they said, "Oh, you'll go through 20,000 a lot faster than you think you will."
Yeah, we'll take some off your hands if you get
right, exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people have been doing, is kind of joining together and purchasing these things together. So Sean, let me flip back to you, and you've heard a little bit of the description from Blake, Lauren, and Tim. What are the ways that employers, and specifically restaurateurs, can get tripped up in the next 2 months as we're in orange and the state is trying to move toward yellow?
Well, I think one of the things, and this is kind of an overriding principle that we talk to our clients about, is make sure that you become aware of and that you follow the local guidance. And it sounds like Tim and Lauren are doing that. The CDC has issued guidelines. The state of Utah has issued very specific guidelines. You've been referencing, moving from red to orange up to yellow. So making the effort to be aware of those guidelines and specifically following them, I think, is a really important first step. A couple other things that employers need to think about. Tim referenced temperature checking, and I don't know if as part of that he also does inquiries among employees about whether they are exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19. I've been doing employment law for 24 years, and any other time I'd have said you absolutely, unless it's a very special circumstance, you don't do temperature testing, you don't ask your employees about symptoms. But this is a different environment, and the EOC has said that's okay now. But there still are some rules. There still are some questions you should not be asking your employees about when they come back to work, particularly underlying disabilities that might make them more susceptible to COVID-19. There's a specific way you need to do that. Some employers are very concerned about employees that might be susceptible to COVID-19, people that have underlying medical conditions or over certain ages. And how you deal with those employees and bringing them back, you got to tread pretty carefully in the type of questions you ask and the kind of requirements you impose. Tim also mentioned temperature checking. That's something that if you do record it, which employers have different approaches to that. Some employers record every temperature of every employee when they're coming back to the workspace. Some employers only record the temperatures if they exceed a certain threshold, either 100 degrees or the CDC has said 100.4. But if you do record those temperature checks, you need to make sure that information is kept confidential that it is kept in a separate file that's not kept in the employee's personnel file, because it's similar to any other medical inquiry. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires an employer to put any information regarding medical information in a separate file that's not readily accessible in the employee's personnel file. So that's something that employers need to be aware of and to keep on top of. The other thing that I would say, and this is a little bit something we haven't really talked about yet, but I'm really surprised at how many employers I'm dealing with have not implemented policies under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. As many in the audience probably know, that's the federal statute that gave employee leave rights for COVID-19 related issues. The federal government had never before created benefits, sick leave benefits or leave benefits that had to be paid by employers, and this is the first time. And most employers have simply taken the poster that the Department of Labor has said you need to post this in your workplace. So they have the poster and it says, here's kind of the basic rules about how the FFCRA works. But the regulations of the FFCRA give employers incredible flexibility in how they manage those leave rights. And if they don't create a policy that explains how the employer is going to take advantage of that flexibility, then they might be shortchanging themselves and having problems with employees who say, you never told me this is what the rules were. The rules that you told me were just based on that poster. So I think it's really important for employers to have policies that govern how they're going to implement the FFCRA leave rights, both to guide them when they have a claim for FFCRA leave rights, and also to give clear guidance to employees about what their expectations are regarding those leave rights.
That's really helpful. So in talking about the guidelines that restaurant owners should be looking at, you mentioned the CDC, also the state, which we've got a fantastic website at, I think it's coronavirus. I always just Google Utah coronavirus, but the website's got all that information. But then you've also got county guidelines, which at least at the present time appear to be pretty similar to state guidelines. Are all these guidelines on the respective websites?
Yes, they are. You can find them. You can look at the county websites, look at the state websites you reference, also the CDC and the Food and Drug Administration also potentially has guidelines. There's also another organization for restaurants, and I can't remember exactly what the name of it was, but there's also a kind of an association for restaurants that has guidelines, and essentially it's a good place to find all of the relevant guidelines for a particular state in one location. And they have information regarding the Utah guidelines. It has the state orders. It has the chart regarding moving from red to orange to yellow. So all this information is available online.
Oh, that's great. And I just Googled it, and it's coronavirus.utah.gov. And it's got just great resources that you can go to and get all sorts of information. So Sean, thanks for all that. Blake, I'm going to come back to you and ask you if there are any unique lessons that you've learned through this whole process. I mean, certainly one of the things that you've learned is that Hell's Backbone Grill has national reach in regards to all sorts of products that you're shipping out, cookbooks, etc., and that you have creative ways of keeping the lights on. Are there other unique lessons that you've learned through this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things, so we opened for season 21 on March 14th, and then we actually did 2 nights, two full turns of our normal service with a stepped up HACCP plan in place, that was based on what we were reading with the CDC. And I'm a big reader and I read a lot and try to get to the truth. So one thing I realized in that process, restaurants, we take food safety and safety very seriously anyway. So we were kind of uniquely positioned to be able to theoretically handle this. But then when you're talking about something like a virus that's unseen and that it's out of our control, and there's children running around the restaurant touching everything, and a line at the bathroom, and you're just bathrooms, and there was what I learned is there is no safe way to do fine dining. And I'm trying to sort of reimagine my model right now. And our restaurant, when Jen and I made it 20 years ago, our plan was to make the restaurant that we really wanted to eat in. Like that was kind of our restaurant model. So the conversation with us and our management team now is what's the restaurant we would want to eat in now? And it doesn't look like the old restaurant. And because like there's very real safety concerns. So we're looking at expanding our outdoor seating. We're looking at possibly getting a different liquor license wherein we're able to do room service with alcohol sales. But there's a lot. I guess the thing that I would say is that I don't function well with an information like I need information in order to make good decisions for me and my team. And it's really hard right now to know. So I want to be open. I miss my guests. Everybody needs the money. People want to come eat here, but I need more information. And that's really been like the most sort of stark thing is that for us too, if any of our staff get sick, then boom, we're shut down, right? Hard shut down, even our retail line. And we can't really, we can't picture that being a good thing for us. So we're hoping that the virus goes underground, and basically my brain hurts from trying to imagine a whole new model. And we have really good people on our team. We're working on it, but it's an ever evolving from day to day project and process as we get more information.
Yeah, that's great information. Thank you, Blake. Lauren, how about for you? Are there unique lessons that you've learned, whether it's lessons about safety protocol or business model? Are there lessons that you would want to share?
I mean, I definitely just realized and felt lucky that we were the type of business we were. Our food does great with takeout. And it's like, with all this people asking how I'm doing, I'm like, we're doing pretty good. Like our numbers with to go have been really good. We're only down 10% from last April, this April. So I learned that we could pivot with the way we serve our food, and it does well that way. And I felt very lucky. But it has opened me up to like thinking, long-term more about this and, but potentially, as she's doing shipping nationwide, we're in a tourist town too and have customers everywhere. And so, yeah, looking into that model, right, of shipping food, shipping our lobster roll essentially from Maine to whoever. Like
take one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you an interesting thing, Lauren. So the other night I got an email from a restaurant in Maine saying we can box up an entire lobster roll dinner and with, Maine bread and Maine lobsters and all these things, send the Maine butter, whatever that is, and you can have your own little lobster roll fest. And I thought, shame on you. We have freshies. We don't need to come in and poach customers. So, well, thank you for sharing that. Tim, how about for you? Lessons that you've learned, unique lessons, whether it's safety protocol or business model type lessons?
Well, I'll tell you, I think we put everything possible for apparel and pitfall into our original business plan in 2009, except pandemic. So it just shows you've got to be prepared for anything that could happen. Cash reserves, right? Operating reserves, and be ready to turn. One shortcoming that we've had. Excuse me. Don't worry. 98.6. but Cottonwood trees are out. One shortcoming that we've had is we've been talking about to go, for a couple of years as that really ramps up as a market segment, right? Nationwide. And, we're a sports bar experience. And so our guest experience is quite different. I really don't want you taking your Irish nachos to your house or having them delivered. I want you in my pub for 2 hours watching the game and continuing your experience. So, to shift and transition, we had to quickly adapt to different packaging, and try to make ourselves as expert as possible during the closure period to move that food out the door. So there's always something. Now we're really learning a lot with staffing, communicating with staff. Here a small tidbit, but this came from lawyers, so it must be true. But rehire your staff or invite them back in writing, right, by email or text. So you have a written record that you've reached out to a team member and said, hey, your position's open. We want you to come back from furlough. And, the team member says, no, thanks. I'm enjoying unemployment. It's paying me pretty well. Now you've got a written record. When that same team member is disappointed in 2 weeks when they're cut off from unemployment, get something to stand by to not come back at. So I feel there's a lot of detail stuff that we have to pay attention to now more than ever.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks, Tim. Sean, returning to you and to the legal side of all this, I've got a couple of questions, but first, you've already talked about some specific guidelines. Are there any other guidelines that you'd like to mention that are specific for restaurants that might assist the listeners today, or have you pretty much covered that ground?
Yeah, I think we've covered that ground. I mean, I think if you look at the state guidelines, and that's probably where you get the most detail regarding what restaurants can do. It is incredibly detailed, and there's very, very helpful guidance. But it boils down to a common sense objective of trying to keep the distance between employees intact, and between employees and customers. Keep that separation intact as much as possible, and trying to eliminate physical contact and physical touching between each one from between those individuals. And that's kind of really what it boils down to. But I think it's the key thing that I want people to understand about the policies is just take the time to find them and read them and implement them. And because if you do that, and if you, heaven forbid, have an employee who gets sick from COVID-19 or a customer who gets sick from COVID-19, and they try to bring some claim against you, claim that you were negligent, and those cases have been cropping up all across the country. If you follow the guidelines that have been promulgated by the CDC, by the state, and by any kind of by the county and local health board, you're going to be in a pretty good position to defend against those kind of claims.
Sean, that was such a great lead in to my next question. So my next question is focused on Senate Bill 3007, Senator Cullimore's immunity from COVID-19 injury bill. And the last time you and I were on a webinar together, the governor had not signed it. And we told our listeners that we were confident the governor would sign it, but we didn't know that for sure. Well, now we know the governor has signed it and that it passed by a 2/3 majority. So it basically has changed the law. And so could you, in pretty good detail, could you give our listeners kind of a description of what the bill is and kind of what protections you estimate it might be giving?
Sure. So when the state of Utah was contemplating moving from red to orange, and this whole idea of opening the state back up was being discussed, a number of senators were concerned about the potential liability. The state is encouraging employers and businesses to open up, and businesses are going to be afraid of being sued if someone catches the coronavirus and develops COVID-19, either an employee or a customer. Because, as I mentioned, there's been lawsuits that have been filed across the country filed by employees and filed by customers. So the design of the statute was to give employers and businesses essentially immunity from those types of claims. The problem with it is, and the problem, or I guess the caveat to it is that it's not a blanket get out of jail free card. There are exceptions to the statute. So essentially the base presumption of the statute, or the base premise of the statute, is that employers and companies are not liable for COVID-19 illnesses that are contracted by their employees or their customers. But there's three exceptions. The first exception is if the employer engages in willful misconduct, or if the employer intentionally exposes an employee or customer to risk, or recklessly exposes a customer or employee to risk. Now, I've been doing this for 24 years. I've litigated a number of cases, and I will tell you that those exceptions will be challenged by plaintiffs' lawyers, by lawyers of employees, and by lawyers who represent customers. Those on companies. So it's not like a jail-free card.
So Sean, you're cutting out just a little bit. I don't know what is going on, and I had to stop you because you're at the money phrase. You're telling us exactly what the effect of this language is. So maybe just give that one more try.
Sure. So can you hear me better now?
Yeah, and you were at the point where you said it is not a get out of jail free card.
Okay. So the exceptions, because of those exceptions, which are, again, if the employer or business engages in intentional conduct or misconduct, if the employer or business recklessly exposes an employee or customer to harm, or intentionally exposes a customer or employee to harm, then those exceptions are going to be available for a plaintiff's lawyer to try to impose liability on a company or an employer. And so I think the real important thing, how I look at the statute, is employers and businesses need to follow the applicable guidelines. If they follow the applicable guidelines with that statute as a backdrop, it's going to be really hard for a plaintiff's lawyer to say, well, you engage in intentional misconduct or you recklessly expose my client to risk, when you can turn around and say, these are the guidelines that were given to me, I followed them. How in the world can you say I engaged in reckless behavior? So that's kind of how I view the statute. One thing that if you don't mind, Mike, I wanted to just comment on real quickly. We've heard a lot of the business owners here on this panel talk about the ways that they're changing business. And I think that's something that's a very, very important point. There will be companies that survive and thrive after COVID-19, after the pandemic's over, whether that's 18 months or 2 years or whatever. And there will be companies that don't make it. And I think part of the factors and part of the kind of determination about whether you make it or you don't make it is how adaptable you are and how you say, not embrace it, but essentially recognize that you have to do business differently now. And rather than fighting it and resisting it, you embrace it and you try to figure out different ways that you can make money. I mean, one of my clients I was dealing with, and they weren't a restaurant, but they were a company that leased office space, and their lease was coming up, and he said, we're not going to renew the lease. We have established work from home for everybody. It's working well. We're going to save money to our bottom line, and we're not going to renew the lease. So I realize that's a little bit different in the restaurant context, but it's that kind of thinking of, I'm not going to resist this and try to go back to the way it was. I'm going to recognize that the world has changed, and I'm going to adapt.
There's that great, too often used phrase, never waste a good crisis. And but I really do think that a lot of businesses and restaurants are kind of rethinking a whole myriad of ways that they operate and wondering, is there a better way to operate? And this is a great benchmark, a great time to do that. And like with our law firm, kind of go back and look at all the things that we do and what's necessary and what's unnecessary, and what should we be thinking to change. So that's a great point. So I'm going to ask just a couple more questions of our panelists, and I'm going to give you a choice. So I'm going to start with you, Blake, and I'm going to give you the choice of two different questions, and you can answer either one. And if you want to kind of throw in a hybrid answer and answer a little bit of both, that's fine too. The two questions are, what keeps you up at night in regards to reopening and where we are with restaurants? Or you can answer the question, what do you think is next for your particular business or your industry? I mean, we know that you're taking a wait and see approach, but what do you think's next for your industry? So I'll let you decide which of those you want to answer.
Well, I haven't been sleeping well, so I'll start there. And maybe I'll do a hybrid, but I guess the thing for me that's interesting, the thing that's keeping me up is the ethics of all of this. So like we did get the PPP money. A lot of our staff, we have about 45 employees, and a lot of them have worked with us for years and years in their family. I know what their medical conditions are. I know their ages. I know who's pregnant, and so for me, what's really complicated in keeping me up at night is how to meet the criterion of the PPP without doing harm to my staff. And so that's a big part of why I'm taking the wait and see, because I don't feel good about saying you have to come back to work or I'm going to bounce you off of unemployment if we aren't sure that we can keep them safe. And we aren't sure that we can keep them safe because fine dining is inherently intimate, as I said. There's just no way around it. You just set a plate down in front of someone. So do we go to a Freshies counter style kind of service? Probably that's what we're going to do this year. But then the question for me is like we just won. This is also what's keeping me up. And I know I have to keep this short. We just got the nomination finally after 4 times being semifinalists for the James Beard. And there's a
congratulations. That's fantastic.
I think we might be the first one in the state that's advanced to the nominee. There's a pretty good chance we're going to win it just based on intel that I have. And like, it's a hell of a year to get a recognition like that, because what we're being recognized for is our the gestalt of the whole thing. And so what I'm messaging to my employees right now is we're not in a rush to get back to get open, because we need to go slow. We need to be methodical. We need to think about how to survive this for the next 18 months to 2 years. And so I guess what's keeping me up at night is just really, that the uncertainty of it all and the ethics of this time, irrespective of the law. What are the actual ethical issues for our customers and our staff and ourselves?
That's great. Thank you, Blake, and congratulations again. That's really fantastic, both for Hell's Backbone Grill, also for the state of Utah. So that's great. So Lauren, same question. Either what keeps you up at night or what's next for your business and or your industry?
I think I kind of covered what's next. I think, we will just be pushing more of this online ordering, takeout. We might do some fun little brochures of here's where you can go take this to an awesome park, and here's parks in a 5-mile radius. So our future is just more focused on more to go, online ordering, and that other piece of maybe shipping nationwide. We've got the world's best lobster roll recognition, and why not use that? And then what keeps me up at night? I mean, it's all the changes, and it's the stress. I think that everyone always has with staff, and did I say something wrong? Did I do something wrong? I kind of speak from my heart sometimes. I don't think before, so it's just all the changes that are constantly happening and making sure, you're doing everything right. I mean, I had 3, I've told my entire staff, and there's signs listed, you have to wear a mask all the time. It's like the restaurant was closed. She was doing dishes. I only had 2 staff members inside. We don't even have people coming inside. So she took her mask down. I had 3 emails last night from customers stating I had employees without masks. So it's just not being able to be at both locations at each time and making sure my managers are instilling this in the staff that this is mandatory. And so it's that kind of stuff. It feels like the same type of stuff.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you very much. And Tim, we'll conclude with you. Same questions, either what keeps you up at night or what's next for About Time and or your industry.
Well, I think what keeps me up at night is the second wave, the third wave, anything that could result, COVID related, that could result in our bars and restaurants being forced to close again. I think that would be bad. So, I would return every dollar of PPP if it could go to vaccine development, right? That'd be great. However, we're going to continue to manage through, proceed with caution, proceed with kindness, make sure that you're doing the best you can to take care of your customers and your employees both, and just maximize that effort. I do think when we get through this immediate COVID stage, yes, there's to go, dine out in all of our futures in a big way. So that's an adaptation that we'll make. Don't know how that works with sports bar yet, but we'll figure it out. We got this far.
Well, that's great. And that's a great note on which to end all of this. So Blake Spalding, Lawrence Maha, Tim Ryan, Sean Monson, thank you so very much for your time. Good thoughts. And thanks to all who have attended today. These are a bit of a regular feature during the pandemic. So we'll continue to notify our clients when the next one is as they become relevant. So until then, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing everyone soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, safe.